He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host Taylor, and today we have two experiences that I will be sharing with you. However, before we explore those, a couple of quick plugs. If you've missed the past few weeks and the episodes that followed, be sure to check out our feeds because we just released one last week where Reuben and I take a look into the Fermi Paradox. We also throw in our thoughts that are just exploring the whole Miami extraterrestrial incident, that just everything that's involved with that. The week before that, we dived into the western provinces of Canada, which I put out a blog post on our website that works in conjunction with the episode. So it's kind of like they work in tandem with each other. But if you also wish to reach out to us directly, you can via cryptidclues@gmail.com. And yeah, just go to our website, CryptidClues.ca. You can find all the information there and latest episodes. But without further ado, let's get into this first experience. Now, this gentleman, this is a very lengthy one, and so it's very interesting, just the intensity. And I liked how there is just that, whether it be a sixth sense or something that you just feel discomfort with, but there's a little bit of build up to this. So, and I quote, "Hello, I currently live in Boca Raton, Florida. About 4 years ago, I got into hiking and camping in remote wilderness areas, mostly in Tennessee, North Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia. On November 15th, 2019, my then girlfriend and our two dogs set out to do some day and evening hiking in the remote wilderness area of Kittico Creek. The wilderness area. It's just west of Joyce-Kilmer Wilderness area and on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. Now, I have to give you some background information. My two dogs. One is a 5-year-old, 80-pound German Shepherd who was literally raised from a puppy, but as a human child, essentially from 8 weeks old. And the other dog is approximately the same age, 18 pounds. However, he is a rescue. When I got him, he had the most of the health issues between the two. I was given the option by the veterinarian we took him to put him down, but chose to spend a small fortune and nurse him back to health. He had adult worms, parasites, fleas, and ticks. He was found on the streets of Miami, barely surviving, and went from that to becoming extremely healthy, clean, pampered daily. He literally does everything with me, from eating to showering, just to sleeping. The only time we're apart is when I have to go to work. When we are together, he literally has to have a paw resting on me. He is ferociously protective of me. So, one time I took a canoe out to the middle of the lake in Georgia, and I left him on the shore with my girlfriend and my German Shepherd to do some fishing. Now, the dog hates water. Nevertheless, he left them both on the shore and started swimming out to the canoe to be with me. I was afraid for him because it was a really long swim and I knew there could be alligators in the lake, but he made it to the canoe and just let out a big sigh of relief. The reason I'm telling you this is to show you how dedicated and loyal these dogs are. So getting back to November 15th, we were hiking just west of Joyce-Kilmer Park. We set out on a remote trail where there's very little to any other hikers, and that day there were no other people or signs of civilization for tens of miles. We had been hiking for approximately 3 hours and didn't see anyone. It was approximately 4 p.m. and we came to a small animal path that led up a mountain. Maybe a 15-minute climb from where we were, I asked my girlfriend if we could go up the mountain. For some reason, I was just enjoying the remoteness of the area and wanted to explore more. She said it was getting late and the sun was getting close to getting ready to set. And since we were so remote, she didn't feel comfortable taking a chance and getting caught in an area so remote at nighttime for fear of getting lost or an encounter with a bear or other predators. We both had backpacks on, but we're unsure if we packed flashlights since we started out pretty early and intended not to be out that long or least this remote in the wilderness. She told me I could go and that she would wait for me at the base of the mountain, but was uneasy being alone in the wilderness for too long, so she asked me to please hurry up. I called for the dogs to accompany me, and we set off to climb the mountain. Now, this was a pretty steep climb, and although there was a path, you could tell it wasn't traveled frequently on because of the remoteness of the area and two overgrown growths on the trail as well. However, me and my two dogs, who I might add love trail hiking and exploring every chance they get, set off to climb the mountain. I remember the sun was starting to set and it was just dead quiet. About halfway up the mountain, both dogs stopped and looked up toward the top of the mountain. They sniffed the air, and my German Shepherd looked at me nervously and turned around and left me on the side of the mountain. Now, I've hiked with my German Shepherd before, and she loves to hike and sniff, and she's never left my side. Not once. I found this behavior odd, but just figured she didn't want to leave my girlfriend down at the base of the mountain by herself. So she ended up just going back and joining her. Again, I thought this was odd, but was okay with it because I still had my one buddy by my side, and I knew there could be a bear up there, and he would not only just never leave my side, but he would probably take on the bear if he had to. He's fearless. In the neighborhood we live in, he is known as the piranha because he growls and barks at the big dogs, usually lunging at them until the leash holds him back. I guess that goes to his days when he was fending for himself living on the streets of Miami. However, I digress. Back to the story. I was about 3/4 of the way up the mountain when I noticed my dog was just starting to lag behind. He was only taking a few steps to my 4 to 5. I kept calling to him, "Come on, let's go." And he would just look at me like, "Do I have to?" And obediently follow. But at this point, we had almost reached the top when he lifted his head and sniffed the air and looked at me with pleading eyes and started to descend the mountain slowly, looking back at me as if to say, "No, you're coming with me." I was really puzzled about this behavior, and even more puzzled when he outright just left me and started down the mountain without me. I was actually starting to get angry at both of my dogs for leaving me, especially because we're so close. I shrugged it off, and now nothing would deter my interest to see just what was on top of this mountain. I got to the top of the mountain, and to my surprise, there's nothing at all. When I say nothing, I mean nothing. There were no insects making noise, no birds whistling, just nothing. It was dead quiet. I actually remember hearing the leaves hit the ground from a nearby tree. It was then that I knew something was not right, and I got a really, really bad feeling in my gut that I was not supposed to be there. And I still get goosebumps just writing this and remembering that feeling. It surrounded and enveloped me like you just get the worst news of your life. In retrospect, it reminded me of the scene in the old Robert Redford movie, Jeremiah Johnson, when he was riding through the burial ground of the Indians, and it was a deafening silence, if that makes sense. I quickly snapped a couple of pictures to show my girlfriend what it looked like at the top, but the sensation was so overwhelming that I jogged down the mountain with my backpack on and stumbled as a result of my hurried pace more than a couple of times. It was pure fear. Now, I might add, I don't get scared easily. I've been in my fair share of street fights, and I've had a fair amount of surgeries as well. I'm even a cancer survivor, and still, this was the most uneasy I felt out of any of those situations. I finally caught up with my girlfriend and the dogs, and I remember yelling at them for leaving me. I was acting pretty irrational and had no real reason or explanation for it at the time. It was just uncharacteristic of me. But that was the encounter. Nothing else would come out of it. Now, jump ahead a couple years, and I'm sitting in my office at work downloading some old pictures from my phone, trying to free up some memory, when the picture comes up of the one I took when I reached the clearing at the top of the mountain. I instantly recognized it as that weird feeling came back to me, although much less intensely. I was zooming in at different areas of the photo and was just trying to see if there's any justification as to warrant the feelings I had that day. As I was scanning the photo, thinking maybe there's a bear or some other animal that made me and the dogs uneasy that I didn't see at first, that is when I saw the face of what looked like something staring at me hidden in the trees. I attended a Bigfoot conference in Tennessee this past July and got up front of approximately 500 to 1,000 people to share my story. A few of the more quiet but real deal attendees pulled me aside when I was finished and told me that that particular spot is known for previous sightings, which I had no idea. They looked at the pictures that I had and heard my story and told me point blank that that's exactly what I saw and experienced. They explained that they sometimes do this through high or low frequency sounds that are inaudible by the human ear, almost like a dog whistle. They can emit a frequency that actually changes the mood of individuals or animals that they develop this ability over the centuries. Now, I can't tell you what it is or was, but I can tell you what happened that day, and you be the judge. End quote. So, what do we know about this area? Of course, we have to take it with a grain of salt. These other individuals lay claim and reassurances that this encounter was genuine, but how can that be based on just a man's word? I do not discredit this person's word or the photographic evidence, but in the world of cryptids, aliens, and paranormal, you have to tread carefully. In the case of this experience, I personally genuinely believe there was something there, albeit a Bigfoot or other, I can't say, but this is a great example of that fight or flight notion, our survival instincts. And I know I've talked about this before, but let's say we're walking and we get to have a sense or see something ahead of us. There are two outcomes. The first, the person will identify that it's a threat lying ahead and will choose to retreat and live another day. The second, the person sees something ahead and disregards it being sinister or ill intent and just assumes, it's just a shadow or something, just like a tree branch or something like that. And thus they progress and it leads to their death because it is a predator and they die. Now, this man did not die, of course, but perhaps may have pushed that boundary as far as he possibly was able to. Animals have this very, very powerful ability of sensing danger, and they left. They knew something was up, so they left. Now let's hypothetically say this was a Sasquatch. Why would it not attack? Why would it not escort them out? Because it probably knew that there were other humans nearby at the base of this mountain. They had dogs as well, so to me it would justify enough reason probably to cause such a level of grief, not to cause a stir or a level of harm, because you don't need more humans in this area affecting your home and your way of life. We can also take into account how close this is to the Appalachian mountain range, albeit still far, but within a reasonable distance, I'd still say. We know Tennessee's eastern side connects to this mountain range, and if you tread back on some of my episodes of discussion with frequent sightings and occurrences, seem to be fairly consistent. I won't say running rampant, but pretty consistent involving Sasquatch in and around these particular areas. Not to mention that this specific spot is a national park. I have no degree of trust in what likes to hide in those forests. And if you're familiar with my position on that, the degree and mystery of missing persons involved in national parks is staggering. Now, at the end of this experience, they conclude, but fail to mention infrasound specifically, but that's the official term, infrasound. So this is basically that capability of causing distress to another living being through certain frequencies and vibrations. Such a frequency, for example, could cause enough distress that a predator could take advantage of its prey. So, is that the case here? This individual got to the top of the mountain. Many signs were displayed that, hey, I should not be going up there. And finally, it came down to this very, very nervous feeling. And some people have reported vomiting, and some people have felt really overwhelmed, and have actually blacked out because they've been exposed to such a powerful degree of vibrational frequencies. So it's important to always be aware of your surroundings when you are out there and paying attention to animals that share heightened senses than human beings. They have the capability of detecting things and picking up on those cues, because if you are in a situation that you shouldn't be, albeit not just a Sasquatch, let's say it is a bear, your dog is going to know and your dog's going to make that decision, and you should follow suit with your dog. Don't get angry at them. Reward them for maybe even saving your life. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at that. And now this person obviously was just convinced that this was something Sasquatch related by individuals that did not experience this or for themselves or go to this area. Just they listened to the story and shared their stance after seeing some photos taken, that's fine. Everyone has that right to take a stance and formulate their own opinions on this. But me personally, whatever it was, remains to be seen. And I'm just glad that they were safe and they managed to get down from that mountain okay. So moving on to our next experience here. And I quote, "After reading about several discussions, I feel like I should finally add my encounter. This took place about 8 years ago in the Quartzville Creek area of Oregon. I am hesitant about sharing the exact location on here, as I respect all life, and I don't want a bunch of people to go up there and try to hunt it down or anything along those lines, but this was on a Wednesday, early July. I had gone up there to go fishing. The Department of Fish and Wildlife posts when they actually stock different fishing areas, and the river was stocked that day before upstream. So I would go up there the day after and can usually max out on trout in a short period of time. I was fishing, and there was no one around, hardly any traffic on the road, and I only saw a couple of cars up there on the road. So while I was fishing, I began to hear some rustling in the trees, but didn't think anything about it. I caught a fish, pulled it in, and put it in my bucket to take home. While I was fishing a little bit later, I heard some more branches breaking and looked up along the side of the mountain and saw a couple treetops moving. Each time I caught a fish after that, I felt like I was being watched. I wasn't sure what was going on. I heard something for each of the next fish that I pulled in. After getting my fourth fish, I set up and cast out. About 5 minutes later, I got my last fish for the day because I maxed out on my daily limit. I got all my stuff together, put all my gear inside my truck, and went to go use the porta potty nearby. After I got out, I started walking towards my truck, and I heard a noise coming from my left up on the logging road. As I looked up, I saw what I can only describe as a large, hairy man walking across the road and down the other side. When I saw him, he was about halfway across the road, and in a couple of steps, he was in the trees and out of sight. If I had to guess, I would have to say about 7 to 8 feet tall. I didn't want to run and make a bunch of noise and attract its attention, and just walked back to my truck slowly and got in. As soon as I did, I started it, and I just hit the gas to get out of there. My truck had a loud exhaust at the time, and I was afraid it would come over there when it heard my truck. As I got out to the road and pulled out, I looked back, and I thought I saw it near where the porta potty was at, because you could see that area from the road. All of this took place in about 45 minutes. End quote. This is very interesting, and this really did prompt a conversation I want to have with Reuben where we explore this more, because it completely went over my head, the concept of if you can train animals to expect certain things. That's why they don't say feed the ducks in certain areas, and they don't want you to feed other forms of wildlife, especially with bears. You don't want bears to be able to detect, like, hey, look at this garbage can here with tons of good food in here. You don't want them to become familiar with that, because this repetition will be a very annoying and dangerous thing that will be reoccurring moving forward once they get that little bit of a taste of this. So how can we view that and apply that to Sasquatch? Do Sasquatch pay attention and know when parts of national parks get restocked with fish by like local, like Fish and Game and Wildlife? Like, that is a very interesting idea, and I this is why I'm going to have a further discussion with Reuben about this, because if they watch and if they see like, hey, this isn't the first time that reports come out of fishermen going out early in the day, late at night, and they get caught out there, and they're usually on the water, and these things come creeping around because they know that fish is being caught, and this fish is food, and food is currency to wildlife. Is no matter how you look at it, it's how you survive, it's how you live out there, it's food. So when these things come around and they see that these fishermen are catching food, they get very interested, they get very defensive, and they get very, very engaged in what's going on. And so this obviously is a very similar situation where it's aware that this area has been restocked of fish. It's aware that this person is fishing and is aware that they've successfully caught several fish. Now, the scary thing is that while it definitely sort of made itself known, I don't think it was necessarily intentional, but the fact that it was there and hiding, that is, again, what terrifies me, is when these things are around and you don't know they're around, but they're watching you. And the fact that this thing was not necessarily escorting him out, because I engaged with this person afterwards and we got a conversation about some of the stuff that was going on with this experience. And so, like I said, they didn't feel like they were escorted out. They felt that it just wanted this area to itself. and that if they did feel really threatened, then they probably would have anticipated like maybe some grunts or some howls or something like that being thrown in their general direction. That being said, they did feel threatened to a slight degree because they were still afraid enough that they didn't want to run and cause any kind of predatory instinct where you see something run and it's instinct. You just charge at it to take it down. So they didn't want to spook it, and I don't blame them. So the fact that it was snooping around the porta potty again makes me just think that it was really just kind of following and just trying to get a proper gauge on what this person was doing, smelling the fish. And maybe down to its core was just curious and generally did want the area back to itself because the lake was freshly stocked. So there's a plethora of reasons, and of course we don't necessarily know how they think. We don't know exactly what their motives are. The only thing that I know I can do as a person is look at other situations and find those connections and those comparisons. And this is just one of those situations where animals can be trained to expect things. And it's just fascinating that maybe that is the case with fishery stocks. So just bear that in the back of your minds. And maybe, I mean, if you want to go out to those remote areas and get the best fish of the catch of the day, be aware. That's where I'll leave it at that. So that is this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be returning again next week. We'll see if Reuben's around and get him back on an episode. But until then, you can find us. CryptidClues.ca is our website. Our email, cryptidclues@gmail.com. Social media channels, Twitter, X formerly Twitter, YouTube, and all your podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that sort of stuff. We're all available there. So thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. And yeah, take care and stay safe.
Thank you.